My Best Friends Live in the Woods. The Adventures of Albert by Anne Michelle Moracek.
In a dream, in a trance, my spirit flies to the pink horizon of the forest, where fairies say, "Come and play," and the animals say, "There's a better way." An enchanted land of love. My best friends live in the woods.
Chapter 18. The Cricket Who Lives in the Daffodil. Livy and I sat together under the drooping limbs of a great and tall spruce, its silver blue needles hanging around us like a fragrant drapery. We had crawled through the limbs to discover the coziest of little clearing at the mighty tree's trunk. We called it the fairy tree, as there is real and true evidence that fairies may indeed frequent the place. Tied to one of its limbs with a piece of twine is a tiny stick swing, and there are round, flat stones in a half circle to sit upon and tell stories. Peering out, we can see glimpses of the sun-dappled hill that slopes gently down to the rocky river flow. The sound of ever-flowing water making the perfect music to accompany our talks to the fairies and spirit guides that bless our lives and imaginations. Today, as we sat and discussed the many ways our spirit guides have blessed us, Olivia confided, "You know, Grammy, I sometimes have scary dreams. I'm in a cave, and there are scary creatures, and before I can get too frightened, the fairies come and wake me up and sing to me." This reminded me of a story Mother Skunk told her 24 children at bedtime, and I shared the tale with Lydia and Charlie at bedtime tonight. So now, I will share it with you. One evening, Mother Skunk put an extra log on the fire and called all her children to gather around. She was often too busy to tell bedtime stories, but Molly had been troubled the past few nights with dreams that woke her with fright and troubled her waking thoughts. Fearing perhaps a low vibration spirit was pestering her, Mother Skunk decided to call in all the light and love of the forest to delight her children's spirits and bless them with happy dreams. Once everyone had settled in, all cozy and snug, and were happily munching on popcorn, she placed in bowls all around. She began. "We all remember the story Albert told about the crickets that played dance music for the fairies," she began, and they all smiled and nodded in agreement. Molly chimed in, "We heard the crickets when the moon covered the sun." "Yes, we did," Mother Skunk agreed. "Well, this is a story about a tiny cricket. The cricket that lived in the daffodil. All the other crickets were green and rather large, and would gather as dusk fell in the trees to rub their fiddle legs together in loud orchestra. Their scratchy music was played with great gusto. The fairies would join hands and dance, leaping to the raucous rhythms, while the toads croaked the bass and the tree frogs trilled. For the night creatures, the concert was the ever-present sound of the way it always was. It was as much a part of the world as the cool night breezes and the moonlight. But to the tiny cricket, the merriment was overwhelming and disturbing. Somehow, he didn't feel at home in the huge group and would find himself wandering off. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but he didn't want to get stepped on by a whirling fairy, and so he went wandering, looking for a place of quiet to call his own. One night, a tiny brown tree frog with the cutest freckles you ever saw noticed the tiny cricket making his retreat.
"Where are you going?"
she chirped. Surprised and a bit embarrassed at being discovered, the tiny cricket just shrugged and said,
"Nowhere." "Well, that is impossible,"
smiled the tree frog.
"You were walking, so you most certainly were going somewhere."
She was teasing him with a big gummy grin only a frog could grin. Her expression was so cute that the tiny cricket forgot to be embarrassed and laughed.
"You have a lovely laugh,"
she chirped.
"I'll bet you have a lovely name to go with it." "Oh, I haven't got a name,"
the tiny cricket said.
"Well, the time will come when the forest gives you a name,"
she predicted. And with another gummy grin, she hopped off.
"Where am I going?"
the tiny cricket thought out loud. "How about over here?" a lovely voice called to him from just across the thicket.
"Who is that?"
the tiny cricket called back.
"Why, me, of course,"
the lovely voice called again.
"Who is me?"
The tiny cricket was trying to look in the direction of the voice, but he couldn't see anything but a lovely yellow daffodil, its cup of soft petals glowing in the moonlight. He came closer and said again,
"Who is me?"
To his utter amazement, the daffodil bowed her head and waved a leaf as if it were an arm or perhaps a wing.
"Daisy, at your service,"
the daffodil said with the most lovely of voices.
"Daisy? But you're a daffodil!"
giggled the tiny cricket.
"I know, isn't it funny? A daffodil named Daisy!"
Her giggle was so infectious, the tiny cricket laughed a big belly laugh. He hadn't felt that cheerful ever before.
"I would like some company,"
Daisy continued.
"Would you like to sit in my flower cup?"
She bent her blossom almost to the ground, and the tiny cricket hopped inside. Then, slowly and carefully, the daffodil straightened, her little passenger safe inside.
"Oh, this is the most beautiful place in all the forest,"
exclaimed the tiny cricket with delight.
"I never want to leave. Your perfume is that of the angels, and your voice is of angel bells. Then you must stay and keep me company."
Daisy the daffodil said with glee, and so he did. The tiny cricket drifted off to sleep in his new cradle of the softest yellow and had lucid dreams. He dreamt he was soaring through the moonlit sky of 1,000 stars. Then, as he watched, the stars turned to a luscious shade of purple and danced and shimmered before him. Each day, the tiny cricket kept Daisy the daffodil company. They laughed together and told stories and grew to love each other's company. Each night, the heavenly perfume would entwine with his dreams, and the purple light orbs would dance all around. One night he asked the orbs in his dream,
"Why do you bother dancing for me, of all creatures, a lowly tiny cricket who has no name?"
And the orbs giggled and replied, "All creatures are equal, and all are loved by the Creator. We will prove it to you. We will give you a gift. What gift would you like? The tiny cricket first thought he would ask for a name, but that seemed selfish. As he pondered, his mind focused on the wonderful way it made him feel when he heard the heavenly voice of Daisy the daffodil. He was always so blessed at the sound of her voice.
I would like to have a heavenly voice, like Daisy, so the cricket songs I play will not be the raucous scratch-scratch of the crickets, but the delicate sound of angel bells to bless the whole forest.
The purple light orbs began to dance around him, closer and closer, until suddenly he felt their vibrations flow into every cell of his being. It was the most amazing dream of his life. In the morning, as he woke, he was anxious to tell Daisy all about the wonderful dream. As he began to recall the story, the sound of the most glorious angel bells filled the thicket. He stopped talking to listen, but the bells stopped. Each time he would start again to tell Daisy about his dream, the angel bells could be heard, and each time he stopped to listen, they would stop. Then suddenly he remembered the gift.
Am I making the sound of angel bells?
He asked Daisy the daffodil.
Why, yes, you are, she answered him, and it's wonderful.
The tiny cricket was dizzy with joy, and he began singing with all his might. The thicket, then the whole forest, began to ring with the bells of angels. Creatures big and small were drawn to the sound, until the daffodil was encircled with every creature of the forest. They all sat together in a circle, at peace with each other, and all blessed by the high vibrations of love and light that flowed through those lovely notes. All from the tiny cricket who lived in a daffodil. Each day for the spring, the tiny cricket would sing, and the forest creatures would rush to the daffodil at the thicket's edge to listen. They began to call him the cricket that lives in the daffodil. And so the forest gave him a name. From that day forward, any time any of the creatures of the forest would start down the dark path of a scary dream, they would just remember the heavenly scent of the daffodil and hear the angel bells in their minds. They would smile and relax into the loveliest of dreams while visions of purple light orbs danced around. Mother Skunk finished her story and looked to see all her children cuddled up snug in a ring around her, all sound asleep, with the faintest smiles dancing across their faces. Tired herself, she put one last log on the fire, sat back in her big overstuffed chair, and went to sleep. "Sweet dreams, my darlings," she cooed as she drifted off to the scent of daffodils, and the angel bells chimed in her dreams.